So according to NCES, the National Center for Education Statistics, looking forward a decade, they're projecting 3% aggregate enrollment growth for all of higher education. Now that's compared to the decade of the 2000s when the growth was 3.8% per year. However, the super macro demographic enrollment projections are basically not relevant to student housing because student housing that we're talking about is at the top 50, top 100, maybe top 175 universities, not all 5,000 post-secondary educational institutions. So we need to hone in on what's going on with enrollment growth there. And in that case, it's 1 to 2% per year in America's top universities. That's healthy, that's strong, and that's the real outlook. Now, demographics. Something pervading higher education in this country is first-generation college students. Many of them are coming from historically underrepresented populations. That creates a tremendous opportunity. Housing providers need to take into account the demographics of the student body and need to craft their housing, their pricing, their staffing, and their activities to cater to the needs of the current demographic population. That's where the opportunity is in the next decade forward, catering to changing demographics. Generally speaking, the rising cost of education is not impacting student housing. What student housing is doing is broadening and diversifying its price points. And so when it was originally introduced in the decade of the 2000s, purpose-built student housing solely catered to the most wealthy students. So today, student housing has multiple product offerings. There's pedestrian assets that are the most expensive. Picture $1,000 a bed per month or more. However, then there are drive properties. It's a property about a mile from campus, has a shuttle service. The average there might be $500 a month. So as you can see, that's a very big different price point, $500 a month versus $1,000 a month. And then we have double ups. And more, the opportunity is for two people to live in the same bedroom. Once again, the rent is much cheaper if you share a bedroom than if you have your own bedroom. So the cost of education going up is not negatively impacting student housing, but rather student housing is responding by providing many more price points and many more product offerings to be able to offer housing for all. In terms of construction, like every land use, student housing is not immune to overbuilding. It can get overbuilt. Today, in the handful of markets that would be described as overbuilt, there's an interesting phenomenon. Where they're overbuilt is at the upper end of the market. That's because the high-rise, the mid-rise, the very expensive, and the pedestrian assets are the highest rents, and that's what's been built in the last 10 years. So where there is overbuilding, it's at the very upper end of the market, and at the middle part of the market, it's not overbuilt at all. And once again, it's a market-by-market situation, so investors would be wise, study your market, because one market's overbuilt doesn't mean the other one will be. There seems to be a general bias that pedestrian assets are superior to drive or non-pedestrian assets in student housing. The fact is, it's just not the case. What they are is they're different products at different prices. So pedestrian assets may be right at the front door to campus, but they're twice the rent and half the amenities. On the other hand, drive properties have double the amenities, they're half the rent, and they have dedicated shuttle service. Picture you're in a cold Midwest market and you walk into a brand new shuttle with leather seats and charging ports that stop at 5 different locations on campus and drop you right next to your classroom. Versus you're in a pedestrian asset and you have to walk 20 minutes across campus to get to the business school. The misnomer that pedestrian is necessarily superior is frankly just not true. They both have their own attributes. They're both attractive to particular students, and drive properties can be equally as good as pedestrian assets. So international students are unique in that almost to a person, they come to America with resources. They have capital that they can invest, and they can afford the best housing that there is available. Today in America, international students represent about 5% of total enrollment in higher education. Of course, those international students are clustered. They're clustered at America's most famous universities. Picture if you're coming from abroad, you want to go to someplace you've heard of, not someplace you haven't. They go to big engineering schools. Schools like Georgia Tech and Purdue are magnets for international students. So you will see they're clustered at very famous universities. That being said, international student enrollment growth had been growing at 7 and 8% a year, unabated, for over a decade, until the current administration and recent policies as it relates to immigration into the United States. And in fact, that has slowed international student growth to where it's basically flat. So today it's at 5% of enrollment. It'll probably stay at 5% of enrollment while our international policies stay the same. But should those change, and when those change, then the international student enrollment growth will be back. They want to come to America. It will become an increasing portion of student housing. But at the end of the day, it's still only 5% of student housing. So international students are welcome. They add culture to the living experience. But a slowdown in international students, or in this case, a leveling of international students, isn't really having any impact at all on the student housing market.